Hello and welcome to Run It Back on the Raptors Republic Network. I'm your host, Sophie Shake, as always, joined by Kyle Ramnarine and Cody Wiles. Boys, we have a lot to talk about today, but first, how are we doing? Kyle, what have you been up to?
Spirits. Despite the injuries, spirits have been up. There's only one way you could really look at this, just positive. Hopefully, the team's growing. I know we're gonna get into it, but it's a little bit sad that Scottie went down. But what can you do?
Hey, well, I potentially have some good news to share in terms of the Scottie injury front when we do get into it. So hopefully that'll help it out. Cody, how are you doing? How's Saskatchewan treating you? Back in your motherland, I guess.
Yeah, if you can't tell, I got the old gaming headset mic out here. I got a beautiful yellow wall behind me, so hopefully that looks all right on camera. Yeah, I'm doing great. I mean, if we're talking about Scottie right off the jump, was sitting in the airport watching that game, so it was I was just on the flight the whole time, like, oh no, what is going on? Because I saw the clip of here's what I was going on. I saw the clip of him saying, I can't feel my foot, and then I hopped on a plane. So I was very scared for about 3.5 hours, but turns out it's all okay.
Yeah, that quote can be interpreted in many, many ways, I assume, just without any context. So I'm glad you found out what it was, and it hopefully wasn't as bad as you originally assumed. But with that being said, we do have a lot to get into, boys. Obviously, our takeaways from the week, just a 2-game slate, so not too many games to go through. The 905 report, as always, and our look ahead to next week's schedule. But before anything else, we would appreciate it if you could like, share, and subscribe to Raptors Republic and give your feedback to this video is well appreciated. And obviously, we want to keep growing in this Raptors Republic community. With that being, boys, let's get into it. Starting with our schedule recap, let's run it back. All right, let's recap another week of Raptors basketball. And the slate was pretty light this week with just 2 games on the schedule, so it shouldn't take us too long. Now, action began in Toronto as the Raptors hosted OG Anunoby and the New York Knicks. It's always nice having OG back in town, and he received a pretty great ovation, so we love to see it. Now, once basketball did get underway, it was a pretty entertaining ball game as both squads kept trading blows. The Raptors even led 61-60 at halftime thanks to a pair of Scottie Barnes free throws. And speaking of Barnes, unfortunately, the biggest bit of news from this week was that something no one wanted to see. The All-Star went down midway through the third quarter of this game with a pretty nasty ankle sprain. He went to contest a Karl Anthony-Towns layup and landed awkwardly and was immediately, and I mean immediately, in pain. Barnes was then later helped to the locker room and did not return. It was mentioned later that he was in a walking boot. We'll have more on his injury status later, so stay tuned for that. Now, meanwhile, the Raptors, who are 2-9 without Barnes, they scrap like hell in this game after losing their most important player. It was largely thanks to the efforts of RJ Barrett and Jacoby Walter. Now, Walter finished the game with a career-high 19 points off the bench. His craft as a scorer, especially in the mid-range, continues to impress, and it almost helped Toronto pull this one out. Meanwhile, Barrett finished with a team-high 30 points to go with 8 rebounds and 4 assists. Honestly, he really just tried to will the Raptors to victory in this game against his former squad. He was making winning play after winning play as best he could. Now, Barrett also scored a basket with 42 seconds left to tie things up, but the Raptors unfortunately just couldn't get the necessary stops against this high-powered Knicks offense. Cat hit a layup to put New York ahead, and then he sealed the game with a dagger 3 a couple possessions later and showboated like a maniac, to be quite honest. Now, it was a valiant effort by the Raptors, but unfortunately, another loss. From there, the team ventured to South Florida to take on the Heat for the 3rd time in 2 weeks. It's kind of weird, but oh well. And although some teams can get caught up in the allure of Miami nightlife and not show up ready to play, the Raptors, at least to start, look pretty locked in. Toronto looked inspired on both ends of the floor, with RJ Barrett steering the ship as the primary ball handler. Now with Scottie Barnes out, he did his best job as he could. He finished with 13 points, 11 rebounds, and 10 assists for the second triple-double of his career, both coming this season with the Raptors. Now, while RJ Barrett was kind of taking care of things as a ball handler, Grady Dick was managing a bulk of the scoring. The sophomore was scoring all kinds of different ways early, even getting a flashy transition dunk as he finished with a team-high 22 points. 12 of those came in the opening frame. Now, the pair helped Toronto lead by as many as 16 points in the first 15 minutes of play. Now, unfortunately, everything went downhill from there for the Raptors. Through the rest of the second quarter, the Heat outscored the Raptors 33-10, missing just 5 of their next 16 shots. And of all players, Nikola Jovic, not Jokic, but Jovic,
did most of the damage as he hit 2 threes and scored 11 points in that run. Now, it didn't help that Toronto committed 5 turnovers throughout that Heat run, and unfortunately for RJ, who did do a lot of good things, he was the biggest culprit. He finished with 6 turnovers, accounting for more than half of the team total on the night. While Jimmy Butler was kept in check throughout the Heat's run by Jonathan Mobo, who was playing some pretty stellar defense all night, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero got to work. The pair combined for 44 of Miami's points on the night, and Hero specifically hit some pretty ridiculous shots. Now, the Heat ended up leading by as many as 20 points before pulling away with a 10-point victory in the end. All in all, the Raptors finished the week with 2 losses and are now 7-19 on the season. They remain pretty bad on the road at 1-12 as well, and are now on a 4-game losing streak. Let's break it all down.
All right, boys. It was a interesting week in terms of the games that were played by the Raptors. Again, both losses, but very different, I would say, in how they happened. The Knicks game was a bit more scrappy. You saw a bit more fight from the Raptors versus the Heat. They had a good stretch to start that game, and then everything just fizzled out. But obviously, the big thing to kind of come out of this week was the Scottie Barnes injury. After the game, he was in a walking boot. It was listed as an ankle sprain, but at the time of the recording, I do have some good news that appears Scottie Barnes is out of his walking boot, and he's participating in light activities at practice, according to multiple reporters there. So hopefully that means he's not out as long as initially kind of thought by most people. But I do want to get your guys' thoughts on just the injury front and what this means for this team. Cody, I'll start with you.
Pack up the barbecue. It's too cold out. Like it's not happening. Unfortunately, Barbecue, RJ Barrett, Scottie Barnes, and Immanuel Quickley still haven't played together this season. And right when you think like, okay, Immanuel Quickley has got to be close, right? Scottie goes down. Gladly, it's not too long-term, so maybe we can bring out the barbecue in the new year. But yeah, man, it's these guys haven't played. I put out a tweet of just the numbers of how much these guys have actually played together since they acquired them. So Barbecue, they've played 439 minutes together. That is literally all from last season. They haven't played at all. If you throw Pirtle onto that, they played a 234. Not what you want to see either. And then if Barbecue alongside Dick, not even 20 minutes. And then all 5 have played 4 minutes together, the pursued starters. That's the craziest thing to me, is that everybody's talking about, the team and looking forward to these draft picks and whatnot. But we don't even know the guys on the roster, how well they played together. Hey, they had a positive net rating in those 4 minutes. I think it was like 33 or something. But yeah, it's just injuries, man. Injuries. It's upsetting, honestly.
Yeah, like your tweet showed there, and I'm glad we had it to show the listeners and the watchers as well, because 4 minutes, not even a quarter of basketball, the presumed starters for the season have played together. Like, how do you evaluate this team? Like, you truly can't. And like, I get it. The losses can be potentially rewarding with a high draft pick. But if you bring in that high draft pick, how do you know where they're going to fit in this system, in this scheme, and alongside these players? You really don't. Like, again, let's say hypothetically it is a Cooper Flag. How do you decide which player is going to get bumped out of the starting lineup? I assume you're going to want Cooper Flag to start if you do get a guy of that talent. Like, is it Grady? Is it RJ? But can you really decide that accurately without seeing how these guys really mesh as a unit together? I don't think so. And like, that's my biggest takeaway from all these injuries, is that, like, be careful what you wish for. Louis Atzman, Raptors Public, he kind of wrote about this too in one of his pieces, that like, injuries are accomplishing this tanking task. That's nice in some regard. But like, when you risk that development that goes along with it, it might not get you where you want to be in the long run. Again, the team coming into the season, I don't think their goal necessarily was to just tank and get a pick. They all said rebuild, but even when you ask Darko and you ask Jakob, their phrasing was more so like, development is a priority over winning, but we're obviously going to keep trying to compete as best we can. So if the losses come with development, fine. They're okay with that. But are you really getting the development anymore when you're getting so injured along the way? Again, look, the Knicks loss, scrappy. You kind of had to react, but that Heat loss, I don't think anyone's going to look at that loss as like a building block for this team, with the way that effort kind of went away for them. And it's going to get harder and harder to be at 100% energy every single game when you have all these injuries and players are being asked to do so much. So I think for now, it hasn't been as bad, maybe in terms of that front, as people might have thought it could be, but it's only going to get worse if these injuries keep piling up and ruining the development. Kyle, where do you stand on all this?
Can I just say, like, Karl Anthony-Towns is Toronto public enemy with #1 for not for #1 injuring Scottie, and then #2 having the audacity to start emoting on us after he
Oh
hit that
god.
He
dagger,
really
bro.
was. Like, he
Like,
got the #1 victory
Yeah.
royale. He was going crazy.
I
Where
was
did
just
that
like,
come from? What did we do to him?
he said he's never won a game in Toronto before, so he's had this
Oh,
own
that's right.
one-sided
No, that's true.
one-sided grudge this whole time, and I was like, oh man, just immediately I got so angry, and that's the Arthur Fist meme. It's just everything. But
I
just watching that game, man, seeing them collide, and then seeing Scottie on the ground, it's everything. I was screaming in my basement, bro. Like, but in every injury or should I say down period, there's always a silver lining. And the silver lining in that game was Jacoby Walter. 19 points. He was confident. He was hitting his threes. He was taking the mid ranges. As soon as Scottie went down, I thought there was going to be maybe a sort of momentum shift. Maybe it would all flip to New York, I should say. But he kept calm and collected. He went right to his spots, right to his mid range, took it hard to the paint, was drawing fouls, So if there's any sort of silver lining you could see from this game, it's that, Jacoby Walter kind of saw an opportunity presented to him in Scottie's absence and kind of took a role upon himself, I should say, at least.
And I think that's like the overall silver lining for all these injuries that have been happening this year is at least the guys who are playing and getting all these minutes are rookies. At least we're seeing the guys on the fringes here who are going to be part of this team long term are getting playing time. They might not be playing with, other long-term pieces and more prominent figures in the Raptors rotation and starting lineup, but at least it's not like a veteran-filled team more so like last year where you're just having guys who are just cycling in who you're not going to see, your Jordan Nworas, your whoever else playing these minutes who aren't long-term guys. It's all rookies. It's all guys they're investing in. So that is the silver lining. But yeah, 4 minutes between the starting five is unacceptable. It's not their fault that it's unacceptable, but it is unacceptable. And I mean, who knows how many minutes they'll even play this season.
Yeah, it's not at all what you want to see. Whether you're supporting tanking or not, like having these guys playing 4 minutes together is just not it's not going to lead to successful long-term basketball for this team. You want to evaluate this core together and you want to see them. But you guys are right. Like throughout all these injuries, and there have been a lot of injuries, and we can go over them. Like I put it down and I listed them, just how many games were missed by all these players with these injuries. It's kind of remarkable at this point how many games have been missed just before even in the preseason. They were missing so many games. But like you guys said, the silver lining has been is we've seen opportunities for players that just didn't otherwise exist. Like the rookies playing together probably wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for all these injuries. Most of them would be in spot minutes. And now we're seeing really, really fun stints from these rookies. I know you guys already touched on Walter, Kyle, you did, but like Jonathan Mobile has been really special defensively lately. That game against the Heat, he caused Jimmy Butler a lot of problems. Jimmy finished with 11 points. He was 3 of 8 from the field. And in the second half, the Heat were like aggressively looking to get Mobo switched off Jimmy because how much trouble he was causing him. And like that's just something you really, really want to see out of this team, especially when they struggle defensively, having a guy get those reps against a really talented player, Jimmy Butler. Again, even with Jacoby Walter, he had some fun in that game attacking players like Bam Adebayo of all people. Like these rookies are getting the reps, and that's how you kind of have to treat it. The silver lining is that it's still not what you want to see, to be quite honest, as fun as it is. But I think at least we can get some solace in the fact that these guys are getting these important minutes and it's leading somewhere. And Darko's getting to still develop his players, even though it's not necessarily the core that we want to see developed.
Yeah, that's all you can. That's all. Like, I mean, that's just what the fact is, right? Like, we can hope for what you want, but that's just where we're at. And let's move on, because we always we're talking about injuries every episode, fellas. Like this
Yeah,
the stage. Like this is so we talked about this
theme, I
last
guess.
year too. This is 2 years now of just injuries this, injuries that. But at least, like you guys are saying, like, we got the rookies down to talk about.
Yeah, but you know what? I'll pivot away from injuries. Going back to Kyle's point about Karl Anthony-Towns, can you really be like super like aggressive and like, this is my place when your name is Karl? I'm sorry, the name Karl just doesn't instill fear in me.
This is what I'm saying, bro. I don't know where that came
What
from.
does it mean?
When he started emoting on us after that dagger, it's like, okay, for one, you hit the dagger, but he's acting like he's had this hardcore rivalry with Toronto all these years, and he's like grabbing his shirt and saying New York.
Yeah,
and you're like what are you doing,
like,
bro?
you just got to New York. I'm sorry. Like if Jalen Brunson was doing it, I would get it. Like you rep like New York, but you just got there from Minnesota. I don't think New York Karl is really intimidating anybody right now. But like, fair enough, I guess. He hit a big shot.
Oh
Wasn't the
my
greatest
God, bro.
defensive, like I guess,
I
plan
can't even.
against it.
I can't even talk because if I hit that, man, I would be hitting the orange justice. Like I'd be emoting crazy. Like I'd be spamming everything. So I understand it. I
We're
understand it.
celebrating like he just won, like he just defeated us in the conference finals or something, and he's been our rival for years. He's grabbing his shirt, going around, bro. That it just got me so
Brother,
annoyed.
this team is 7-19. Trust me, they beat
Exactly.
themselves 20 in that game. All right, well, you know what, Karl Anthony-Towns, I guess kudos to you. You hit a big shot. He's actually been really good for the Knicks this season. Maybe cool it on the celebrations though until you guys actually start winning some games
It's like
a
okay,
bit more consistently. But on that note, we are going to pivot to the 905 report. That is our bread and butter, boys. As we all know, we bring you the best Raptors 905 coverage, and it was a pretty interesting week for the 905. Again, a light schedule, kind of like the Raptors with 2 games. The 905 hit the road for both those games. The first, a blowout loss to the Delaware Bluecoats. You had some interesting performances. AJ Lawson made his debut with the 905, which was really fun to see. Eugene Omarui, he's still doing his thing. He had 31 points, super efficient. But the second game, the game that happened the day that we're recording against the Maine Celtics, a 115-114 win. And that was it was a fun game because of just how many massive runs both teams made. The 905 started like they were down by I think 10 or 12 after the first quarter. And in the second quarter, they completely flipped the script, outscoring Maine 40-24. A lot of really big performances. Eugene Omarui tied his career high with 34. AJ Lawson had 34 points. Jamal Shed with a double-double and a career-high 6 steals. And then Quincy Gary, 19 points, 13 rebounds. And just for an Ulrich Shamshe update, he had 4 blocks against Maine in that 1-point win. And if you didn't watch it, I highly suggest going and watching the highlights. The end of the game was just complete chaos. Somehow the 905 escaped with the win, even though they turned the ball over twice in the last 20 seconds. So that was a super fun one. But Cody, I'm going to start with you. What stood out to you from the 905 this week?
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, the response in this game, because in the Delaware game earlier this week, they played their worst quarter of basketball in the second quarter in that one. It was atrocious. Like
that's saying something. They've had some tough quarters of basketball.
It is saying something. Like too many turnovers, and it just honestly looked like they weren't like carrying. It looked like they had a couple days off there, so it looked like they were just kind of going through the motions. Got outscored by over 20 or around 20 in that quarter alone, and they just basically they couldn't come back. So it was really cool to see them respond. And it's also cool to see AJ Lawson doing his thing. Another Canadian now in the fold. DJ Carton getting waived from his contract. Only played 6 games on that 2-way contract, by the way, fellas, since he signed that.
Injuries, man. Just more injury talk.
What am I? Come on, it's like sure, it doesn't matter what level. It's just
injuries.
Yeah, it was an ankle injury last year. I believe it was the right side last year, and then he missed the final 20 games, and now left side this year. Yeah, Carton was only able to play 6 games, and Lawson's already played a third. I mean, Carton only played like 3 G League games too with the team, so Lawson's already almost matched that after his second one. But he's been really fun to watch. He is athletic. He gets out in transition. He is fast. He is quick. He's fun, man. I want to hear what you guys think, but he is great. Like I went back and looked at his combine scores because I was like, this guy's got to be, testing high. Yeah. He for sure did. He had the fastest three-quarter court sprint during the 21-22 combine. He had the 5th fastest shuttle run, and then the 8th highest vertical with 41 inches. So he proves it on the court. Great in transition. He's even defending a little bit better. He shot the 3 decent so far too. I believe he's 6 of 14 for, what is that, 43% nearly. So if that continues, if he can shoot the 3, then Toronto, here we go, another hometown guy.
I'm glad you mentioned his combine stats and just all the speed stuff because, oh my God, he is so fast. Anytime you watch him on the court, he is just speeding past people, especially in transition, but even in the half court. Again, for anyone who watched that game, listening to the Maine Celtics broadcast, anytime they talk about AJ Lawson, the word fast was used because he was just getting around with so much ease and so much zip. It was incredibly very impressive to watch. And like you said, Cody, the 3-point shooting has kind of ticked up a bit. He hit 4 against the Maine Celtics. And he was pretty instrumental in that team win. Like in the second quarter, when the 905 really flipped the script, I believe he had 12 points as well. Towards the end of the game, the ball was in his hand in some really crucial moments. He had a 3, I believe, late that really helped kind of ease things a little bit with that pressure of the comeback. So he's been a very, very fun addition. And the Canadian contingent has kind of been picking things up as a whole, which is a lot of fun. It's a fun storyline. Like we've talked about, Quincy Gary has been kind of a steadying ship for this team, quite honestly, for most of the season. But Eugene Omoruyi, that dude is balling. I think I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but over the last like 4 or 5 games, he has to be averaging around like 28, 29 points a game because he's put up he put up 28, he put up 29, he put up 31 the last game against Delaware, albeit in a blowout loss, and then matched his career high with 34 against the Maine Celtics. And the biggest thing is these are super efficient games. He is maybe missing like 3-4 shots at most. He's doing so much work inside and close to the basket. Against the Celtics, he started 3 of 3, so he's not really taking a bunch of shots to make this happen. He's just playing clean, effective basketball, and it's helping the 905 in a lot of instances. In that first quarter, when they were getting beat up, he was really their only spark, and he kind of kept that going and got the rest of the guys into it the rest of the game. So, like, Eugene Omoruyi, he has just been super impressive. I don't know like if you guys want to add to that, but he just stood out for me so much throughout this span. No, I think Cody, are you muted?
You might be muted, bro.
You guys hear me? You guys hear me? Okay,
there we go.
Okay, I was saying, thank God I was muted because I was about to go on a tangent about Eugene. I was like, Kyle, jump in now before I get my Omoruyi stuff in. Go ahead, Kyle. Yeah,
okay.
Jump in. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Before you guys go on your tangents too, like for me, like honestly, you're probably gonna take all the words out of my mouth, but both of them amazingly impressive. I know Zolfi was talking about how fast he was, especially if you see in the half court, his first step getting to the paint is quick. But this whole team, just like I know you mentioned it too, Cody, the response from the 905, in that first quarter, they were just getting in the paint. It was almost like layup lines. The Celtics were just attacking the paint over and over and over. And I saw a stat like both of them had the same amount of 3-pointers made, but the Celtics were up by almost 20. So I was like, what's the problem here? But again, the defensive response, the adjustments they made. A guy like Jamal Shed, 6 steals and only 1 foul. That just goes to show you what type of defensive player he is, where he knows where to put his hands. He knows where to reach, where not to reach. And the whole game, he's been impressing me. Like maybe his shots weren't falling. I noticed he was, I think, 7 to 20 from the field, but that kind of what impresses me from him too. Like his shots aren't falling, so he knows when others are hot and when to get them involved as well, not to keep forcing his shot. But again, there's other aspects of the game where he knows to be effective at, and when he can't be effective. But go ahead, bro. I know you want to get into your tangent here.
Yeah, well, I already sung the praises of AJ Lawson, so I'll piggyback on the Omoruyi a little bit. Yeah, his shot selection is like perfect. Like
literally perfect.
Like he shoots everything open, makes smart decisions. He's at 60% from the field right now on 15 attempts per game. And I liked the 3-point numbers. I was like, well, it doesn't click in my brain. Like he's a 3-point shooter, just under 33% on 3.5 attempts per game, below average, but that is a good building block. Super physical, good rebounder. I like to call him the garbage man. He literally just he cleans up everything on offense. O boards as well. Like he's averaging 8 boards a game, nearly 3 on the offensive end. He's physical when getting to the basket, great footwork in the paint, and just finishes everything. Like he's been fantastic. Like he's playing so good. He might get a call up from somebody, and it might not be from the Raptors.
Yeah, again, he's building with each game, right? Like every single game, he takes it up a bit more, a couple more shots, a couple more assists. Like he's just really getting comfortable in the system. And you can tell the 905 are like honestly relying at him for long stretches of games. And I think that just speaks to what he's done in such a short amount of time. And it's been super impressive. But I want to go back to Shed, and you mentioned it, Kyle. Like he was the anchor for this team defensively in this comeback. And I think that's super important to point out because they forced 23 turnovers against the Maine Celtics. And that was a very big reason why this 905 team that isn't known to be this half-court, like, savvy offense. They really do rely on transition and getting out. Cody, you mentioned many times it's all about pace and moving. They took advantage of that. That comeback doesn't happen. They don't stay in that game without their defense kind of leading the way, which Jamal Shed was a big part of. You mentioned a career-high 6 steals, but he was just moving people into the right spots. He was communicating very well. He didn't have a perfect game, especially towards the end. He had a very costly turnover. He took an ill-advised shot, like a contested layup, so it wasn't perfect. But for Jamal Shed, it was a building block, which is kind of what you want to see him taking these minutes for. And like he's learning so much in real time. Like we've seen how his 3-point shooting has improved with the Raptors because of his reps with the 905 and what he's been doing in practice. And you're hoping to see even more of that as he goes. So I just wanted to go back to Shed and say that was a very impressive stint from him, regardless of the stuff that may not have been perfect.
Yeah, I'll add to it real quick. Oh, so go ahead, Kyle. I'm about to go off again.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, you know what, like, yes, he did make mistakes, but like, I think I wrote even about the Raptors Knicks game, like with Jacoby, he stepped out of bounds in the clutch minutes. They'll make mistakes, guys will make mistakes, but we shouldn't punish them for it. They're just gonna learn from it, and I think it just honestly goes into the building blocks. I'm not saying we are punishing them, but it just goes into the building blocks, and I honestly think his defensive prowess is so elite, and that should guarantee him like a spot on this team going forward. A fully healthy Raptors team with Shed coming off the bench or something, that just kind of gets me excited, going forward. It gives us defensive options around. I want to see if he can guard, those big time guards, see how he would do on someone like an SGA, like a Kyrie. I'm just curious to see what those matchups would look like,
Yeah, and hey, the bounce back and the resilience and the learning happened literally in this week in these 2 games that we saw. Because against Delaware in their 23-point loss, he was not good. He was probably the worst player on the 905. He had the worst plus minus 28. He was 1 of 8 from the field, only had 2 points, a couple more turnovers and points, which is probably not the best thing. And him and Jamison Battle, who actually suffered an ankle sprain in that one and was out for this one. Who knows how long he's going to be out, but that's another injury.
More injury talk, man. We just find our way back to it.
I don't know why. I don't know. But yeah, Jamal Shed responding in a big way, and you see that, and they won. Like, he wasn't good. The 905 didn't win. He bounces back, plays well. A bunch of assists in this one. Zolfi, you mentioned he was driving and kicking. His passing is just great. Like, I noticed it at the Raptors level. He does it at the 905 level. He's able to get to the paint and then dish. Great bounce back game for him. And ultimately, the 905 they're putting out, like, with the amount of roster moves they're making. Like, they've also just added Frank Kaminsky. Maybe we can get into that a little bit. Haven't seen him at all. But yeah, they are. Jared Rhoden is somebody they brought back now who was projected to be one of the best players in the G League. He has monster numbers in the 2 games he's played. He hasn't even played yet, dealing with a shoulder injury. Not to mention, we have barely talked about Quincy Guerrier, who was really good in this one. Dylan Disu has showed good things. Tyreek Key has a game winner. Not to even mention Shamshay, who's been a little down lately. He hasn't been the best. Yeah, he had a bit of a more hot start, but he's kind of been trending down. But there is talent. And then that's not to mention if you want to send Jacoby Walter and Jonathan Mobo down there more often. So like this, there's so much talent on this team. They should be better than 4-10, but hopefully they can continue to grow. Tip-off tournament is done now, getting into the regular season. It should be good times. And I would really suggest going out and watching 905 ball, man. You could hear it in our voices. Like, this is a lot of talent there, a lot of Canadian guys to watch too. Like, if it's an off day and you got time, throw it out. It's on YouTube.
Yeah, like, honestly, I couldn't agree more, Cody. Like you mentioned, tons of talent. The Canadian contingent is kind of becoming a real narrative for this team. The Raptors as a whole, the organization, it's very clear they emphasize trying to foster Canadian talent, and you're seeing it at the G League level as well, which is super fun. But yeah, just the other guys, the talent is absolutely there on this roster. Hopefully, as the season goes on, they're going to kind of put it together a bit more, like you said, with the regular season coming around. And shout out Luke Wynn, the general manager of the 905, because he's been tinkering with this roster a lot. He has been making moves. And like you mentioned it, Cody, the latest move that has happened, it's not official yet, but it was reported by Mark Stein that Frank Kaminsky will be joining the 905. Now, just to clarify, it would not be on like a 2-way or anything. His NBA tenure is too long for that to be the case. So he's basically just joining this team and trying to earn a shot to get back to the NBA, whether it's on a 10-day or some kind of contract post the trade deadline time or whatever that is. He's just really trying to make a name for himself and get back to the league after an overseas season. So, Cody, I'll start with you. I knew you did write the Raptors Public News here about this, but like, what are your thoughts on Frank Kaminsky joining this 905 roster?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up as we speak. It's gonna be interesting because he's 31 years old. He's a vet. It's interesting because for a lot of the guys that are on the team right now are young and rookies and potential to, be with the Raptors long term. But he's a player kind of similar to Charlie Brown Jr., where it's like you're a veteran, like you're your future probably isn't with the Raptors, but you're just playing to get your own stats up, to get your own numbers up, to potentially get picked up by somewhere else. And that's exactly what Mark Stein said in his reporting, that he's joining the team for the G League Showcase, and that he's gonna, be vying for a possible 10 day at some points. He's, yes, like you mentioned, Zolfi was overseas in the Adriatic League last season. But he, I was looking back at the numbers. I was like, he actually put up some solid numbers. If you take out his last season, which was the 22-23 season, where didn't play
like
at
10
all.
games,
And the minutes he was averaging like 6 minutes per game with the Hawks and Rockets. If you just take his first 7 years of his career with the Hornets and Suns, 9.5 points, 4 rebounds, 1.5 assists, and 35% from distance and 43% from the field. So those are just kind of the counting stats, but he can shoot the three, and he's big, which the 905 would love to have right now, especially the size. Like, they need it without with Ulrich Shamshe kind of down right now, and just the overall big play in the G League not being the best. Kaminsky should be one of the best players in general in the league.
Yeah, I think that should be the case. Again, a veteran player who has shown not like elite talent at the NBA level, but reliable talent. Again, a very high prospect. When he's coming out of college with Wisconsin, he was obviously a very good player there. So I think I'm excited to see him kind of be a stabilizing force for this 905 squad. Like you mentioned, Cody, he's a massive human being. He's a 7-footer. He would be the only 7-footer on the 905 roster. Again, immediately the tallest player, just a bit taller than Ulrich Shamshe. And I think there's an understated thing there about how he could help Ulrich's development. We've seen it from him, like with his down period, just fouls have been a bit of a problem. Just the offensive game hasn't worked as much. Like, I don't think Ulrich is necessarily going to model his game after Kaminsky. I think he's probably a lot more athletic than Kaminsky ever was or will be. But I think he can learn a lot from a guy who's been through those years in the NBA and kind of who figured it out a little bit. So I think that could be a really fun storyline with them too. But yeah, it's stability. It's a big body, and you mentioned he's not a knockdown 3-point shooter at 35%, but he can shoot it and he's willing to, and that's a fun element to add to stretch things out a little bit. So I think it'll be at least a positive for the most part, both on offense and on defense, kind of helping this 905 team, especially on the glass where they don't really succeed a ton. Kyle, what do you have to add?
Damn, Zolfi, he took what I was about to say too. I was just thinking, like, he might, like, we focus on what he might be able to do on the court, being a 7-footer, he can spread the floor. But I was thinking, what can he do for the guys off the court? Being a mentor, being a kind of, he was in the NBA for 8 years. Like a lot of people don't get to say that. He played under a couple of different teams, played under different systems, and he can help a guy like Shamshe, help him with, again, less fouling, getting his feet under him, getting a better, like, learning his role better. So that's what I was kind of thinking about, just taking, I know he's here to kind of like earn his shot, try and get back into the NBA, but like there is a way where he could help Shamshe as well to, kind of take him under the wing and not show him the ropes, but at least help him or mentor him, I should say.
Exciting times in the G League, fellas. Exciting times. Yeah.
Talented roster. They're still adding. They're making moves. And again, the basketball, there's been some ugly losses. Like, we'd be lying if we said otherwise. But there's also been some pretty damn entertaining wins throughout the process as well. So I think this team is fun at the very least, and it's a very accessible experience for a lot of people. And as always, we right here, us three, and the rest of the Raptors Republic team, bring you the best Raptors 905 coverage. No one does it like us at Raptors Republic, so we always appreciate people supporting. So watch, share, talk about it. As long as that's happening with the 905, we are very happy. But with that being said, we are going to now move back to the NBA Raptors and talking about next week's schedule, looking ahead at it. And the Raptors return to Scotiabank Arena for 3 games at home this week, hosting the Bulls, Nets, and Rockets. A little interesting, the 2 East squads are in a similar spot as the Raptors in terms of both records and just their roster timeline and, like, let's say current compete level. And then you have this Rockets team that's been one of the top squads out West, obviously a very, very elite defense, and they've been on the rise pretty much all season. So I'll start with you, Kyle. What do you have your eyes on this week with the Raptors schedule?
Honestly, like, I know, probably assuming Scottie's going to be out for this entire week with his foot injury.
He's out against the Bulls. That's been confirmed. I'll say that.
That's what I'm saying. So I don't know if he's coming back, but I'm looking forward to Point RJ making a return here. When Scottie was out, RJ was running that pick and roll with Jakob. He was getting his assist numbers up. And Grady, Grady too was playing out of his mind. They were kind of taking on the weight left by that Scottie absence. So I'm just kind of looking to see how the team kind of readapts back to it, if they kind of just, again, slip back into how they were earlier in the season when Scottie was out. Grady putting up historic numbers for him, and RJ just kind of taking over the offense. So just want to see how they do with, again, Scottie being out.
Cody, where are you at?
Yeah, I think that is exactly what you should be looking for. But I'm gonna go a little different. We are recording this on December 15th. It is, if you're a little bit of a diehard, that means it's the start of unofficial trade season. I guess just maybe like official trade season, as all the players who signed contracts this offseason are able to be traded. Is there tampering? Dennis Schroeder, he wasn't eligible to be traded and got agreed. What happened with that?
Teams tamper, everyone tampers. It's just it's an unwritten rule at this point. How can there be reports that they've already agreed on a deal for a guy who can't be traded yet in D'Anthony Melton? It's because they're talking to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the Thomas Bryant trade as well. Both happened. So anyways, quick little plug. I wrote a little piece on Raptors Republic. Go check it out. A little bit of a primer as we're in the unofficial start of the trade season. But with that being said, I want to monitor what these guys' minutes who could potentially be shipped out, what they look like. The main guys I mentioned in the piece were the 5 oldest guys on the roster. Garrett Temple, I just said, they'd probably want to keep him anyways, probably has more value to them than anybody in the league. Garrett
Don't
Temple,
trade our union rep. We love him.
Yeah,
he dresses the best on the team.
I would never suggest that, and I didn't suggest that in the piece. I just lumped them in with the 5 oldest players on the roster, with the other ones being Chris Boucher, Kelly Olynyk, Bruce Brown Jr., and Jakob Poeltl. It's gonna be interesting to see what these guys, what their minutes look like. I said in the piece, Jakob Poeltl, I doubt he gets moved. But we'll see. I mean, it's I don't think you could rule it out at this point. And I've seen a lot of discourse on Twitter of people wanting him to get moved. So let us know in the comments if you want Jakob Poeltl moved, Jakob Poeltl not, because I'm genuinely curious about what people's takes are on this. I'm in camp, keep Jakob, keep Yak. But for the other 3, we'll see what their minutes look like. Kelly Olynyk has now just come back, perfect timing. Maybe coincidental, I don't know. That's maybe for all the conspiracy theorists out there. Bruce Brown is still not back. He's been listed as out with reconditioning for a couple weeks now, I feel.
How long has he been on this cardio program? What's going on? How long does it take that condition back? I guess he just wasn't doing anything when he had knee surgery, which it makes sense. But the reconditioning stint has been very, very long at this point. It's not Grady Dick's conditioning stint from last season. I'll say that.
Yeah. So it will. Maybe he comes back this week, and I want to see. Probably start him off slow regardless, but I don't know what the injuries is. He just getting into the starting lineup? Or are they trying to showcase him? Because I remember us doing a pod before the start of the season. It was do you think Bruce Brown will be on this team by the trade deadline? And I think we all unanimously said no.
Yeah.
So it's coming up, and he hasn't played a lick of basketball. So they're for sure going to want to get him into the lineup to showcase him. Presumably.
You think?
And then there's also the bench bigs. Do we see Boucher's minutes go up a little bit? Do we see Kelly Olynyk's minutes go up a little bit? I don't know if they're motivated to move them or if there's a market for them at all, but just something to monitor. So long-winded comment, I guess I should say. That's kind of what I'm looking for. Just to, shenanigans. It's shenanigan season.
It sure is. And I'm glad you brought it up because it is interesting. And for me, out of those players you mentioned, Chris Boucher is the one that stands out to me. If they are playing him, you just have to assume it's because they're looking to shop him, because he's been isolated out of this lineup. I will go out and say I don't think completely fairly because of what he does offer. I think the Raptors just know who he is as a player and know what he brings, and there's no real future upside to it. So they're okay, we could just have him coasting while we can try developing these young guys. Jonathan Moe can get those minutes. We know Kelly Olynyk is a bit more versatile as an offensive player. So I think that's why obviously Kelly's back. And to your point, Cody, yeah, he's probably also just they're looking to shop Kelly Olynyk at least a little bit. But yeah, Chris Boucher, he only really played to start the season, with all the injuries that were going on. He hasn't been playing lately, even though we did see positive stints out of him. He made his usual mistakes, but nothing we don't expect with a with the falling for a pump fake foul that he usually does. But like he's a spark plug. He's a veteran player. He can provide that to a lot of teams, I think, in the NBA, especially as a stretch big. So I think if he is playing during these next couple of weeks, I would have to assume the Raptors are very actively looking to move. That's my read on it. So I'm very interested to see where that goes. And part of me kind of hopes it happens because I think he deserves to be in a place where he can contribute to winning basketball, which I think he absolutely can. But for me personally, the kind of what I have my eyes on for this week is that game against the Rockets. I think can be a lot of fun. The Raptors will have to get up for it. That is an intense defense. I would love it if Scottie Barnes was back for that. Maybe not fair because having to come back from injury against that Rockets team is asking a lot. But you always have the element of Fred VanVleet playing against the Raptors. It's at Scotiabank Arena. And then Amen Thompson and Tari Eason, just two absolutely insane defenders, especially on the perimeter. How does this team respond to that? A Grady Dick, RJ Barrett. What does Darko and this offense scheme up to work against it? It is asking a lot. But you saw it against the Knicks when I talked about it last week about like, hey, you're playing against the number one offense. Your defense has been turning the corner. What can it do? And in some ways, they found success. I don't think they necessarily stopped the Knicks offense, but the Raptors kind of kept pace with them for the most part. They ran out of steam towards the end, but I think the Barnes injury had a lot to do with that. But you were keeping up for the most part with this very high-powered Knicks team. And I kind of want to see if you can do it against this Rockets team now on the other end. As the Rockets aren't a great offensive team. They're obviously completely relying on their defense. Alperen Sengun does pretty much everything for them offensively. So I'm really curious to see how this team plays against the Rockets. And I think it should be a fun game if they compete how they have and they scrapped against the super high-powered teams.
Yeah, that was the Knicks were the number one offensive team in the league, and the Rockets are number two. If you want to argue number one by the numbers, by defensive rating, the number two. But it's going to be cool that they kept up with the Knicks. So let's see how they could do against the Rockets. Hey, Kyle, you excited?
Yeah, that's what I'm hyped for this week. You know, just every time I think about that Knicks game, bro, I just think about the Karl Anthony-Towns celebration, bro.
Oh my god, you have PTSD.
Nah, bro. I was gonna ask you guys, have we heard anything about Emmanuel Quigley, or is it still indefinite? It's just nothing.
So, from what I saw, again, on the day of recording, December 15th, he is now using his left elbow or left arm, which he wasn't for a while. It was in a sling, obviously, where he had a UCL tear. But he's now using it. But I don't think that really clarifies anything in terms of a timeline. Like, to what degree is it being used? I don't think it has been reported, other than the fact that like he's probably participating in light activities and drills post-surgery. So he's definitely getting closer to a return, but I don't think that's anything even close to definitive. I think the only one that's probably close-ish is Bruce Brown. Again, I don't have no idea what this conditioning stint looks like, but if I had to guess, he's probably the closest. And then Scottie Barnes. Ankles can be finicky. Sometimes like you just have a couple days rest and it really does heal up quick, but other times they can really linger. So I don't think we can really speculate beyond just like soonish.
I was gonna say this. Oh, okay. I don't mean to interrupt you, Cody, but I was gonna say if this goes a few more months, do you think they just pull the plug entirely on Quickly for the season, or they could let him get some reps in?
I mean, I don't know if the injury was that bad. I mean, but that was exactly what I was gonna say. Is like they're not in a rush to bring people back. Like they're gonna make sure 100% they're gonna go. Even Bruce Brown. We talked like 2 episodes ago about we should be able to see Bruce Brown this week. Nope, that was wrong.
But the reporting was he was supposed to join them on like a road trip a couple weeks ago.
Somebody did say that. We did not make that up. Somebody misreported that, or something went on there. But still reconditioning. They're even taking their time with Bruce Brown. Like Scottie is, if you think it's going to take this long, maybe add 2 to 3 games on it. You know what I mean? That's kind of how they're operating. So it'll be, you know what? I just want to see Bruce Brown play. Honestly, I just want to see the guys play. That's all. Why are we talking about injuries again, man? Stop. How do we get on this again?
But fingers crossed.
It just has to be injuries, and more.
It's just. I'm telling you, every time an injury happens, I just fall to my knees, bro. Whenever I hear the news, like.
Yeah, we basically just message each other and we're like, all right, I guess we know what we're talking about this week, even though that's what we talked about every other week. But that's just the reality of this season for the Raptors, unfortunately. Hopefully that starts changing. It did for a bit. People were getting healthier and things were kind of turning a corner. And again, we saw development strides throughout that. Point guard Scottie was a thing. RJ Barrett was kind of fleshing out in his role. Grady Dick's game you saw was scaling up and down based on what was going on, and other guys kind of fleshing out around that. So there has been some positives with all the injuries, and hopefully we can stop talking about injuries soon enough. But I wouldn't put money on it, that's for sure. But I think that's a good place to stop for this week. I think we've covered pretty much all of it. And as always, we want to thank you for tuning into another edition of Run It Back, where we recap everything with Raptors basketball. And we'll be back next week, as always, to kind of go over everything. But as before, as I reminded people, please subscribe to the channel. I believe we are very, very close to 12,000, and that is a very exciting thing for Raptors Republic. The channel is putting out more content than it ever has before, and we are very happy to be a part of it. And as always, please subscribe, share, and comment. Like Cody said, give us your feedback. Let us know what you think about this episode and your thoughts on the Raptors as a whole so far and the injuries that we keep talking about. But don't forget to do that. And also, RaptorsRepublic.com has all your best coverage, analysis, and opinions. But with that being said, have a great week, folks. For myself, Kyle, and Cody, we'll see you next time when we run it back. Peace.